Heavenly Father, thank you for our gathering here today and for your presence with us, for your Holy Spirit. So I pray that all that I share this morning will be for your glory and your blessing of your people. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. The story is told of a man with very few words. When he came back home from church one evening, his wife asked, "What did the preacher talk about tonight?" "He preached about sin." "What did he say about it?" "He was against it." So, in our reading that Claire read to us just now, there's a lot about the sins that, as God's people, as his daughters and sons, we need to put to death. Sins of sexual immorality and sins of speech. And I thought, looking at this, I would talk about someone who learned about this, putting these things to death, who learned about them in the hard way. Right. My name is Judah. You can read about me in the book of Genesis. I was the fourth son of Leah, my father's first wife. Yes, Dad had 2 wives, but it was my mum who kept having sons, while the other wife did not. Unfortunately, Dad preferred the other wife. It's not a good idea to have 2 wives. 1 wife is quite enough. 2 is double trouble. My mum hoped by having sons, Dad would love her. So when I was born, she was so pleased that she named me Judah, which means praise. Eventually there were 12 of us sons, a football team with 1 reserve. But all was not well. Just as Dad had his favourite wife, he also had a favourite son, Joseph, who was the first son of his favourite wife. We were all busy looking after the sheep, but when we didn't do our work properly, Joseph would tell our dad about it. Worse than that, Dad had given Joseph a very special coat. It was not the kind of coat you wear if you have dirty work to do. So he left all the really dirty work to us. We hated him. We treated him like he was not one of us. We called him names that I couldn't repeat in here. Then he had these dreams. He said that we were binding sheaves of corn out in the field, but suddenly his sheaf rose and stood upright, while our sheaves gathered round his and bowed down to his. We said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And we hated him even more. Then there was another dream he told us about. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream. This time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." He told Dad as well. Dad said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" We thought Dad should have been more cross. A bit later on, we brothers were away near Shechem, helping our sheep to find pasture. All except Joseph, in his special coat, was at home with Dad and our mothers. One day Dad told Joseph to come and find out how we were getting on and to take the news back to him. From a long way off, we saw him coming. "Here comes this dreamer," he said. "We'll see what will come of his dreams. We could put an end to him and tell Dad that a wild animal has got him." My big brother Reuben tried to talk us out of it. So instead we ripped off his coat and dropped him down into an empty well and sat down to eat our lunch. Then we noticed some men with camels coming past, traders with spices on their way to Egypt. I, Judah, had an idea. "What do we gain," I said to my brothers, "if we kill Joseph? If we sell him to these traders, we could get rid of him forever. They would take him as a slave to Egypt. That way we do not take his life, and we'll never see him again." My brothers agreed, so we sold him for 20 pieces of silver, and he was gone, aged just 17. We took his coat and put some blood on it and returned it to Dad. His grief was awful. He mourned for days. We tried to comfort him. "Dad, you've still got 11 of us. You still have your football team." But it was no good. He groaned. He wouldn't eat. Time passed. I married a girl called Shua. We had 3 sons. They grew up, and the eldest married a girl called Tamar. But he didn't live very long. She married his brother, my second son. He died quite suddenly too. So my daughter-in-law was widowed at a very young age. My wife Shua had died by this time too. I should really have arranged for another husband for Tamar, my daughter-in-law, but somehow, with sheep shearing, we didn't get round to it. Well, Tamar decided to do something about this. She heard that I was due to pass near her village, so she took off her widow's clothing and disguised herself with a veil. When I saw her, I didn't know she was Tamar. I thought she was a prostitute and went into her tent. She said, "What will you give me if I let you sleep with me?" I said, "I would send a young goat." She said, "Well, what will you give me as a pledge that you will send the young goat?" I asked what she would like, and she pointed to my staff. So I left her with the staff, and we slept together. 3 months later, I was told that Tamar was guilty of prostitution and was pregnant. The punishment for that would normally have been death. But she said, "I'm pregnant by the man who owns this staff." I was so ashamed, and we let her live. Later, she gave birth to twin boys called Perez and Zerah. I became father to 2 sons, or whether they were my grandsons, I wasn't sure. About this time, we noticed it hadn't rained for a while. Funny weather, Dad said. But this was serious. We were running out of food. Dad heard there was plenty in Egypt, so he sent us brothers there to buy some to bring home. We'd never been anywhere like it before. All those amazing buildings, even a great stone lion with a face in the sand. We were ushered in before the ruler. We had no idea this was our brother Joseph. We bowed down to him, our faces to the ground, just as that dream long ago said that we would. He was fierce and accused us repeatedly of being spies, so we tried to say, "We were honest men. We were 12 brothers, one is no more, and the youngest is at home with our father." But he wouldn't relent and put us all in prison for 3 days. After that, he said, to prove that we were not spies, that what we were saying was true, one of us must stay in prison, and the other brothers should go home and come back with the youngest brother. He was Benjamin, the only other brother who had been born to Dad's favourite wife. We went home and reported everything to Dad. We had bought a lot of grain, but it didn't last. Dad told us to go back and get some more. I began to talk to him and say, we had to take Benjamin with us, or else the ruler would give us nothing. Dad got into a great state. He said, "Why did you bring trouble on me by telling that man you had another brother?" Because he asked lots of questions, we said, even asking if you were alive. We had no idea he was going to say, "Bring your brother next time." Then I spoke to Dad. "Send the boy along with me. We'll go at once, so that we and you and our children may live and not die. I myself will guarantee his safety. You can hold me personally responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him here before you, I'll bear the blame before you all my life." So Dad let us go, sending many gifts to this frightening ruler. We arrived with our gifts, bowing again with our faces to the ground before him. We still didn't know this was Joseph. He behaved strangely, giving us all a sumptuous feast. Then it was time to go again, our animals carrying all the grain we had bought. We hadn't gone far when the ruler's servant caught up with us, accused us of stealing his master's silver cup. We were horrified. We would never do such a thing. Our sacks were searched, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. We hurried back to the city, once again bowed low before this ruler. We said we would all be his slaves. No, he said, just the youngest who had stolen the cup would do that. At this, I, Judah, stepped forward. I who had sold my brother to be a slave all those years before, offered myself in the place of Benjamin to be this man's slave. This seemed to unlock something. This ruler began to weep. Then he told us he was our brother Joseph. He began to talk to us in the Hebrew language. We were utterly astonished. He hugged Benjamin, and the tears flowed. He embraced each of us, and we talked. He said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." We had just got the greatest surprise of our lives. So, a few thoughts as I just bring this towards the end. Judah learned the hard way that sexual immorality doesn't pay, and that hard, unkind words come back in the end. And what's very interesting later in the book of Genesis is when Jacob blesses his 12 boys. There's a chapter where he has words for each one of them. Mostly they don't get very much, but there's a whole paragraph for Judah. And one of the sentences says this: "The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. And he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his." Jesus was descended from Judah, and that prophecy looks ahead to when Jesus would come as a descendant of this man. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he who comes, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his. Jesus was not ashamed to be descended from a sinner like Judah, who sold his brother as a slave and slept with his daughter-in-law. He was not ashamed to identify with people like us. He was not ashamed to descend from the children of that relationship with Tamar. Do you ever feel you were not born into a normal family? Do you feel shame? You don't need to, for Jesus was descended from someone in that sort of relationship. Jesus identifies with you. Perhaps you were conceived outside of marriage in a casual liaison, such as between Judah and his daughter-in-law. Are you tempted to feel actually you were never really wanted, not meant to exist? Jesus was not ashamed to be descended from someone who may feel like that. He stands with you. He's with you. Are you someone like Judah, who sold his brother as a slave? Are you someone who somewhere in the past has let someone else down very badly? Maybe you did away with a life somehow. Jesus is not ashamed to be descended from someone like you, from Judah. He loves you. He forgives you. Are you someone like Joseph, son to whom immense harm was done in the past? God can turn it for good, just as he did for Joseph. Remember his words to his brothers. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. And last thought, sometimes we do go through difficult stages in our lives, just as all these characters did. Joseph, a captive in Egypt, far away from home and family. Jacob, suffering bereavement. But we need to look at things in the long term, and so that things at the moment are not always going to be as they are. Hold fast to the Lord who is good, who works all things together in the long term. Hold fast and trust him, who is working his purposes out. Let's pray.